So if you can, please do donate. I think I have my friend on the line with me. Dave, are you there?
You sure do, buddy. I'm right here.
Beautiful. Fantastic. Yeah, we're having some strange feedback. Hang on. Doesn't make any sense. Here we go. All right, Dave, you want to take it for a second?
Absolutely.
myself.
Okay, so I'm Dave from Shiny Stadio. This is Meki. We've had so many technical problems in the last few days, but guess what? I'm back in the chat room. It's been 5 weeks. Apparently something to do with static IP. I was blocked. I'm good. Worked it out during the week. Meki, don't fear. I'm in. Yay. Crowd goes wild. However, today, you know what I thought I'd do? I'd restart my computer. Why? I don't know. I'm a crazy person. But guess what happened? Skype said, on my way, when it was booting back up, Skype said to me, you know what? Would you like to update it? And I've seen those messages before. I'm okay with that. So I hit yes. Do not do it. It's completely different now. It's a black background. All my contacts are gone. I have nothing. No conversation history, no links, nothing. It's all gone. It's logged me in with the correct account. However, there's nothing there. And I'm just lucky Meki had the station and his credentials that he could read to me in the 2 minutes left before we went live to air. Oh, boy. It's something else. Meki, can you hear me loud and clear?
Oh, no. The audio is fantastic. Funnily enough, I hear the delay. So I can hear myself. Oh, no, not anymore. Okay, it's gone. Beautiful. So it's all good? Hello?
Yes.
Okay, great. Just make sure, because we had so many difficulties, like Dave said. I want to make sure everybody can hear us. So thank you, everybody. If you are listening to us, we can hopefully be understood on your end. And I get Dave loud and clear. I hope you all as well. Diet Joke in the chat room is telling us audio is good. So thank you very much. Appreciate that. Yes, we are on the air. And again, sorry about the slight delay there, slight dead air, but we are back. And this is show number 267, I want to say, 760 and 200.
Yeah,
right?
267.
Wow, that's a lot of shows. It's every year, every time we have a show, that's another show, right? So it's just more and more shows as we do this.
It's only going up.
Only going up. Now, obviously, before we came in on Solaris was on, Dave. I didn't get a chance to listen to her. Did you get a chance to listen to her show?
Not at all. I was out with the kids at the beach, enjoying it. It was beautiful kite flying weather.
It is, and in fact, here in Australia, it's we're a bit lucky. This is a month of short weeks. Last weekend, we had the Easter weekend, which was bookmarked, if you will, by Good Friday and by Easter Monday. This week coming up, we have Anzac Day on Tuesday, which means, of course, that hardly anybody will be in the office on Monday.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I told my guys as well, look, guys, come in the office if you want to, but I probably should tell you that you should not want to. So it's all good. Yeah, so if anybody from the team listens, as long as I can contact you, it's all good. Don't come to the office. It just, it's not worth it because there'll be nobody there. Yeah, so we've had 3 weeks of 4 working days this month. It's unusual. As we all know, Easter is a moving feast. And it just so happens that our April weeks have been cut short. So that was a boon, a little bit of a boon, and we're quite happy to have that happen to us, Dave, I'm sure. And like as you said, today is unseasonably warm. It's a fantastic day. I took my daughter to Bunnings, and
that's like Home Depot, guys. Except
like
it has
massive.
but it has way less furniture, and it's not like a general overall store for the home. But what it is, it's building materials and screws and all those kinds of things. It's really cool. It's a great day out.
It is. In fact, they've got sausage sizzle, which is like for the Aussie barbecue, if you will, and then
it's a mainstay.
And they have kids face painting and kids activities. Anyway, there's also a little playground in there. And what did I do? I bought some screws and some anchor points for my screws because I've got plaster, like plaster walls, which is a gyprock, we call it here, which is not awesome.
Drywall,
And
if you're in the US.
One of my, that's right. One of my toilet roll holders had come loose and it was jiggling and jaggling about, so I had to get the anchor points and screw it in. So it was it was minutes of hard labor. But I do enjoy these little handyman jobs. I'm not good for much else. I guess plumbing is I call someone. Electricity, I call someone. It's all good, I guess. In fact, electricity is something where you should always call someone. But Dave, tell me about your week, sir. How's your week been?
The working week has been okay. I'd hurt my back minutes after the show ceased last week. Just a stupid thing of I carried a ladder upstairs in the dark and tripped up the stairs. And I'd been suffering from that most of the week, but otherwise it was pretty good. If anyone is a fan of James Bartley, I did an interview with him, although I have to say and confess to him later on that I was highly medicated on muscle relaxants, so I was a bit chatty. And it seemed like a good interview. I think he got about 5 words in the 2 hours.
Nice.
Yeah, that's one of the things that I really like about a guest, where you ask, "Hi, how are you?" and then suddenly you've got to wind the show up because it's 2 hours later.
I know, right?
It's the seasoned professionals, Mackie, like Stan and Friedman. We only asked a couple of questions and there was the whole show done.
Whoosh. Yeah, absolutely. It was fantastic. So, I mean, not to say, right? That's a good thing. And being medicated is not really always a bad thing in these situations, right? So it's all good. Well,
I really needed it, Mackie. I was really having a hard time with it. And it was more my hip, not really my back, but it was where the muscles attached to my hip on my right side. Really had a hard time. So I really do sympathize with anyone who has any sciatica or any nerve problems in their back. I really do feel for you. I might have laughed in the past, but having experienced it myself, my goodness me, you can barely get around without pain. So, loafers are a good choice because you don't have to bend down and put them on. Thongs, if you're in Australia, they're flip-flops if you're in the US. Don't picture me in a thong, whatever you do. However, outside of that, Mackie, have you seen a tremendous... Because watching the news is the segue here. Watching the news. Huge... Maybe the collapse of media about North Korea.
When you say collapse, you mean stopping of reporting, or?
Yeah, it's a media silence.
Yeah. I guess people don't want to get overly concerned, I guess.
Overly concerned. Well, guess who was in our country this week? Mike Pence. He flew in what's that, Air Force 2, I think is the plane. He landed here in Sydney, saw the Prime Minister. They chatted about whatever they told us they were going to chat about. That's clearly what they chatted about. But I still am more confident to say that I believe what they were talking about was the North Korea situation. And that's why the media silence. We're not going to advertise our position, says Trump, in the past. So I believe that they're not talking about it. I think Mike Pence is going around to all of the allies saying, this is what we're going to do. This is our plan. So it's not through the airways. It's not through the internet. It's not through the phone system.
Yeah.
That's sense. What I truly believe is the case, Mackie. What do you think?
Well, look, these days it is difficult to keep anything a secret, right? A phone conversation, even encrypted messages over the internet, whatever it may be. Whenever
encryption,
you have to...
that's funny. That just stops honest people.
Exactly, right? Exactly right, though. That's true. Whenever you have to trust some kind of wire or some kind of electronic system, whatever it might be, to relay your message, chances are that it can be intercepted. I mean, it goes right back to the days of the telegraph, even a letter, right? The only true secure form of communication, providing the messenger gets through, is just having the message delivered themselves without actually carrying a message, but being able to just talk to the message. Just having the message delivered from mouth to ear, as it were. That's really the most important, or the only secure way to communicate state secrets, for example. So you have these messengers. Notwithstanding the knot system of the Aztecs, that was pretty ingenious, or the Incas, I think it might be the Incas. But the point is that it makes perfect sense to me that the Secretary of State, or even the President, would fly around, even the Vice President would fly around, and tell the allies. And Australia is also, look, you can twist it any which way you want. Australia is a staunch ally of the United States, has always been, or ever since, pretty much since we, I guess, cut the umbilical cord from the UK. And we really looked, probably since the Vietnam War, I'd say, we've always looked to America for strategic security in the region. And I would expect that he probably goes to Japan, South Korea, would probably stop if he's allowed in China. But I do believe there's probably some action going to be coming up against North Korea. I'd be surprised if there wasn't. We've got two situations here. We've got North Korea and we've got Syria. I think the North Korean situation is probably the more dangerous. I don't think the Syrians are anywhere near as powerful as anyone would like us to believe. But I do believe the North Koreans, they have nuclear potential, and they are working on ICBMs. Yeah, so it is a fair threat that's coming our way, and we need to understand how we can diffuse the situation without launching into some kind of nuclear strike. I mean, come on, guys, that's the last thing we need. Another radiation source. Really, Fukushima is not enough. I think Fukushima is plenty. Thank you. It is.
Yeah.
And it's actually not that far from Fukushima. Like, if you look at the global positioning of North Korea and Japan. So that's not good. No one is going to be helped by having another radioactive contamination happening there. And look, in Australia, like I said, due to the prevailing winds and the ocean currents, we are fairly inured against these things. You, on the other hand, everybody else on the planet, not so much. Not so much. The northern hemisphere is going to suffer, and we still have fallout coming into California, all of the west coast, really, of the United States, and in fact the American continent. So that's what I think, Dave. Give you a really short answer.
Well, I just remember when I was a kid and I was at school, we were taught that pollution was bad. This is the 70s. In the 70s, pollution was bad. Remember, the river caught fire or something. Leaded petrol was polluting the atmosphere and making everybody extremely dumb. I don't think that's ceased. I don't think we're getting worse, but for other reasons. And they mitigated the lead in fuel at no cost to the consumer.
Yeah, that's right.
Freon gas. Freon used in refrigerants, Freon used in the fire suppression systems in computer data centers. It's a non-oxygen source. Remember the three things: you got fuel, heat, and oxygen. You take one of those away, the fire can't continue. So heat, if you make it cold, the fire can't continue. If you take away the fuel, the fire can't continue. If you take away the oxygen, so the fire can't continue. So if you can smother the fire in some way, taking its oxygen away, replacing it with another gas, that's what they use Freon for. It's an inert gas. We thought it's less inert than we thought. And in fact, it's bad for you. So I remember having, as soon as you hear the bang in a data center, for instance, this little segue here, Mackie, it'll make sense. The room instantly clouded with a gas, and you had to get out in the breath you already had. Otherwise, they just find you dead. That's it. So that gas, Freon gas, is another gas that would go up into the atmosphere and eat away at the ozone layer. Unfortunately, that and all the refrigerators used that gas. It was a great gas to compress, and it was a great gas to expand, and it had a great endothermic reaction during its expansion, which is causing the cooling, and it was a tremendous refrigerant. Unfortunately, we couldn't use that anymore. Guess what? That was rectified. They changed the gas. I forget what they call it now, but they changed the gas, and it made it just a slightly less. It was like the second choice gas for refrigeration. But that gas isn't going to affect the ozone layer negatively. However, that was also mitigated without any cost to the consumer. That makes sense. Lead-in paint removed as well. Real easy. But guess what? What are we doing about the environment now? Doesn't it make you sad? Doesn't it really make you change the way you think about everything? Because no one seems to be doing anything. There's all this talk. It's like the philosophers have taken the argument away and they're just chitty-chatting to themselves. The governments have moved the discussion to financial impossibilities. We can't fix it. No. And then the other half of the government is saying, well, there isn't a problem at all. What problem? With their head in the sand like ostriches. Who's right? I think the philosophers should shut the hell up. I think the government should say, you know what? I don't care whether it costs us money. We'll throw money at it. And even if it isn't real, we've pleased everybody anyway. Why not go renewables? The big question there is who the government is a puppet for and who's its biggest contributor. Heavy industry, heavy polluting industry, because they want to be their government's friends so they don't get turned on by the government. And this is the big shame. So you see big coal in this country. We're sitting on one of the world's largest coal deposits, and it's become unpopular. To go, well, we'll use it then. Oh, we'll sell it to India. Meki, India, Adani mine. Largest mine on the planet's going to be.
Don't get me started on Adani.
All right, wait. So, but I think you'll find the 457 visas weren't sufficient to get all the Indian workers out in the Adani mine, so they've abolished the 457 visa, which is immigrant workers, and they've made 2 tiers to make it more viable for the Adani workers to come out. It's not going to have any employment here, but that's I'm getting off my soapbox. Just recognize my point of view, you know.
You're right, though. The problem is, and this is happening everywhere, guys, and this is why we're seeing the things that we're seeing to some extent, or at least this pretense to fixing them. We are seeing a deliberate dismantling of the middle class. We've already given the have-nots nothing. The haves are getting more and more every day. That's clear. But what we're doing now, we're shrinking the middle class in Europe, in Northern America, as well as in Australia and places like that. And we're taking away jobs that are now becoming more and more skilled. We're even taking jobs away that you would have thought, well, you can't really take them away because they require you to be in country. Mm-hmm. They require you to be in country. So we all had of offshoring. Offshoring, you understood, it doesn't matter where the call center sits. It doesn't matter where the telephone operator lives. It's completely irrelevant. This is a telephone. Who cares? That has now gone to actually offshoring critical functions of companies, like payroll, human resources, whatever, things like that. But also other functions, customer service, more than customer service, engineering functions, technology functions, marketing functions, all functions going where they're very cheap. And now, amazingly, onshore labor is also being offshored by onshore labor. So instead of having people, and miners are probably, you cannot offshore a mine. You can't do it. It's there. You have to dig up the ground. So what you do is, it's true, right? Yeah. So what you do is you bring in people from overseas that work for peanuts, right? That's what you do, and then you ship them out every 6 weeks or whatever the visa restrictions are, saving a bucket. And Gina Reinhardt wanted to do that, and she was saying, "Oh, it's the fault of the Australian miners because they want to be paid." And she said, as much as they want, but I'm saying a decent living wage is what they want to get paid. Mm-hmm. And clearly, she doesn't have enough billions. She isn't already fat enough. She's so fat she can't even look at her own eyes anymore. I'm sorry, but she is, right? And it's all that foie gras and the caviar and whatnot, whatever.
Foie gras, yes, that's what it is. Yes.
She is so rich, right? It's obscene. And she hasn't done anything for it. Like, she wasn't like a genius behind this whole thing. She just inherited it all.
Mm-hmm.
But the point is that she was complaining about people wanting to earn a fair living. And is quite happy to bring in her case, it was Chinese workers that they wanted to bring in, right? I go, okay, whatever. So this is a real problem. Now, with the Adani mine in Australia, it's going to be one of the largest mines, if not the largest mine in the world. I think it's going to be an open cut coal mine. So it's the biggest hole we'll ever punch into the planet. But the Adani mining concern is an Indian company owned by Adani, no less, an Indian billionaire, and the Australian government wants to give him billions of dollars to build that mine, and tax concessions and direct stimulus as well. So I'm saying here, why are we giving a billionaire billions of dollars to mine our coal, for which he will get a profit?
That's right.
Okay, and we all know that the taxation of this whole thing doesn't work. And now, to add insult to injury, there may not even be any Australians employed. There may be miners that are going to be flown in from overseas to
might.
Mines. Sell it. Sell the whole country. Sell it. Off you go. All of it. Queensland is now sold to India, except for the utilities, which are already owned by China. You think I'm joking?
And Meki, what did they also want to do to the world's largest living organism that you can see from space?
Oh. Okay, so the Great Barrier Reef already has issues, right? There's record bleaching. There's the the crown of thorns, the starfish killing it, eating it. The ocean's getting warmer. They want to build a shipping line through it.
Just plow a channel through it.
Yeah. Wait, what? Seriously? I mean, yeah. Again, coal. This is Mr. Turnbull. That's his name, right? Turnbull. Is living in the back pocket of the coal industry. That's where he's made his little nest. Once in a while they fart and he thinks it's perfume, and it's all wonderful. Because he's going to walk away with gazillions and job in the corporate industry. All his buddies are going to make gazillions of dollars. In the meantime, we have raped and pillaged Australia, Queensland specifically, I have to say here, because the Great Barrier Reef, again, is an extension of Queensland. The Adani mine is in Queensland. Most of the fracking that goes on in Queensland. So God hates Queensland, obviously, right? That's clearly the message here. That's what it is. But guys, this is real. This is the real deal, and it happens everywhere. I mean, it just happens that all of these things happen at once in Australia, but it's the same pattern everywhere else in the world. There's no difference to this pattern. It is the same kind of exploitation, the same kind of. They say, oh yeah, there'll be jobs for the people. That's a good thing, you think, right? Except there ain't no jobs for the people, right? Because they're going to bring their own people in. It goes right back to the American gold rush. You know who did the mining? Like the hard yakka? It was the Irish immigrants. And the Chinese they brought in. Yeah, the local dudes didn't get much of a say. It was the big mining concerns like, what was his name? Hearst and others like him, right? That bought up all the mines and killed off anyone that didn't want to sell their claim and anyone and their stake. And they just brought in the Chinese and the Irish and so forth to work the mines. And they lived little better than slaves. Little better than slaves, I can tell you that. So that's nothing has changed, Dave. It's the same. Exactly the same game.
Oh, I think you hit the nail on the head. I think you're right. Remember that they just tell us that things are changing and it's getting better and it's going to be better for everybody, and really they're just saying it's going to be better for themselves. And we're selling our country to someone else. Yeah. Now, if the government was going to spend billions to allow someone else to dig it up, why don't they dig it up?
Yeah.
And one of the things that I always think has a particular irony about it, and it's the government saying they can't do better, they can't operate a company better than, the business community can. They say that, the business community can run a company much better than we can. What? But aren't you the government? Aren't you able to do, if you can't even run a company, how can you run a country?
Now you're treading on dangerous ground.
Oh, we see, we're bureaucrats, and all we do is, we pass a bit of paper from one person to the next, we talk about it in the media for a bit, and then really nothing happens.
Yes.
So that's why we've come full circle. That's why I'm complaining that all of this rhetoric we hear about renewable energies being impossible, there's no base load. Well, Elon Musk has solved it all. Batteries. They should be funding it. The government should have done it already. And then if the temperature keeps going up and we're not using any coal, then the argument can start.
That's right.
If we're all driving electric vehicles and no one's lighting any fires, just remember, Mackie, not even 100 years ago, everyone was burning their rubbish in their backyard. We had an incinerator. That's what we did. We just burnt stuff in the backyard. Everyone had fires. All of the cooktops were, augers or augers, and they, it was like a campfire oven in your house. Go back 200 years, no electricity. That's how everyone cooked. Imagine the pollutants in the air then. Well, that was carbon, and guess what? That wasn't the big bad time. Why is it so bad now? But that's a conversation for another time. Meki, guess what? We have reached the bottom of the first hour, and I must say, as soon as it opens, there we go.
Now you must say it.
I must say it now. Get yourself some great merchandise from the station's website. Buy a CD of your favourite host shows for the previous season. Or maybe get yourself an EMP-proof thumb drive with survival documents, over 1,000 of them, plus something special that Hawk can't tell you about until you see it. Maybe 75,000 seeds in a seed pack for your donation. In return for the donation you've made, follow the instructions carefully, though, on the website. And I do warn you, if you live in Australia, you can't import them because we have customs laws. If you're in the US, though, you've got continental US, where the boundaries aren't customs driven and there's no restrictions on transportation of seeds, you please take advantage of it. It's a great bargain. Nowhere can you get such a good pack of fruit and vegetable seeds than can you from the website. If you're in the US, though, you can call in. You can join this conversation on 347-688-2902. But we do implore that you go into the chat room at Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com it is, and go in the chat room and talk to us while we're on air, and we can invite you on. If you don't have a phone, but you're listening to this over the internet, you can use Skype. You might be in a different country. You can add the contact called Freedom Screen. It's all one word, Freedom Screen, as in a fly screen. If you live in Kentucky, even better. You can get us on FM, on WZZR 101.3, or anywhere else in the world, and I do mean anywhere else, including the ISS. Even there. Or on an American warship that we've discovered had been listening in the past. You can get those via an app. You can listen via tunein.com. Freedom Slips has its own mobile app, so check it out on the website. There's other apps you can get, TalkStream Live, streamfinder.com. But if you've got access to an application store, whether it's on your Android or iPhone or Windows platform, good luck on the Windows one. By the way, Microsoft have abandoned the mobile platform. Look for Revolution Radio Studio A. But if you don't want to do that, just get Shiny Side Out's own app. We made an app, and you can get the station anywhere you are, as long as you've got the internet. So, this is show number 267.
760 and 200.
Very nice. Mackie, I have to say the new Skype audio is pretty clean.
Actually, I wonder, you know what? Next week you're going to dial in first and we'll see what the difference is. And then I'm going to dial in first again because I have a feeling that I have a better Skype connection than you. But we'll see what the truth of the matter is. Having said that, and just something that Dave mentioned earlier, Nighthawk also has a side business, maybe his main business.
Mm-hmm.
He sells, he grows and sells fruits and vegetables, guys. He also has some recipes. He's a woodworker, so he's pretty much an all-around Renaissance man when it comes to things like that. So if you have the time and opportunity to go to his website or maybe to his farmer's market, go ahead and buy some of Nighthawk's produce. On Facebook, it's if you're his friend or if you search for him. There's some great pictures of what he does, his cooking, his produce. It's really nice. So and it's organic, guys. So please go ahead and take a look at that. That's where the seeds come from as well, by the way. They're his own seeds, as far as I know. Dave, we are talking about the quantum mind, and have been for the last 2 shows. The quantum mind is I can't believe that we didn't actually have a show on it. We had touched on it a number of times. We had spoken about the holographic universe. We're talking about quantum physics, a whole bunch of things, but we had never actually talked about the quantum mind. And without further ado, I want to quickly jump into this article, which was written in February of 2017. So just a couple of weeks ago. Yeah, actually, just a couple of weeks ago. And it was written by Philip Ball. Dave is enjoying his Microsoft Office tribulations. So in the meantime, I will read some. And Dave, what I will do, I will ping you the relevant paragraphs as we come to
That'd be great. Thank you.
Okay, here we go. So what I'm pinging you now is what you're going to be reading once I'm done. 1 second, my friend. I've got some unexpected visitors. There we go. My daughter wanted to tell me that my other daughter had an ouchy head.
Oh.
Okay, there we go. Everything seems to be under control. Very good. Now, this is an article that was written by Philip Ball, as I said, in February 2017, and it's called The Strange Link Between the Human Mind and Quantum Physics. And here we go. And this is the little byline that goes with the article. Nobody understands what consciousness is or how it works. Nobody understands quantum mechanics either. Could that be more than coincidence? Coinky dinky. We'll see. And I'll start with a quote here in the article. I cannot define the real problem. Therefore, I suspect there is no real problem. But I'm not sure there is no real problem. So this is a case of I don't know what I don't know, right? And this was said by the American physicist Richard Feynman about the notorious puzzles and paradoxes of quantum mechanics, the theory physicists use to describe the tiniest objects in the universe. But he might as well have been talking about the equally knotty problem of consciousness. Some scientists think we already understand what consciousness is, or that it is a mere illusion. Now, just this quick segue here. Well, that's actually a valid theory that some people have put forward, in their mind at least, where they're saying, well, consciousness, free will, and your self-awareness is all an illusion. You're deceiving yourself into believing that you actually are self-aware. That's something to think about, guys. It's a little too esoteric even for us. Now, the perennial puzzle of consciousness has even led some researchers to invoke quantum physics to explain it. That notion has always been met with skepticism, which is not surprising. It does not sound wise to explain one mystery with another. But such ideas are not obviously absurd, and neither are they arbitrary. For one thing, the mind seemed, to the great discomfort of physicists, to force its way into early quantum theory. What's more, quantum computers are predicted to be capable of accomplishing things ordinary computers cannot, which reminds us of how our own brains can achieve things that are still beyond artificial intelligence. Quantum consciousness is widely derided as mystical woo-woo, but it will just not go away, Dave.
That's right. Quantum mechanics is the best theory we have for describing the world at the nuts and bolts level of atoms and subatomic particles. Perhaps the most renowned of its mysteries is the fact that the outcome of a quantum experiment can change depending on whether or not we choose to measure some property of the particles involved. That is the crazy part. When this, we call it the observer effect, was first noticed by the early pioneers of quantum theory, they were deeply troubled. It seemed to undermine the basic assumption behind all science, that there is an objective world out there, irrespective of us. If the way the world behaves depends on how or if we look at it, what can reality really mean? The most famous intrusion of the mind into quantum mechanics comes in the double slit experiment, my favorite experiment of all time, and the subsequent follow-ons from that to try to determine more detail. Some of those researchers felt forced to conclude that objectivity was an illusion and that consciousness has to be allowed an active role in quantum theory. To others, it did not make sense. Surely, Albert Einstein, the most famous physicist on the planet that's ever lived, once complained the moon does not exist only when we look at it.
Or does it?
Sorry, the moon does. Yeah, that's right. Today, some physicists suspect that, whether or not consciousness influences quantum mechanics, it might in fact arise because of it. Isn't that crazy thought? They think that quantum theory might be needed to fully understand how the brain works. Might it be that just quantum objects can apparently be in two places at once, so a quantum brain could hold on to two mutually exclusive ideas at the same time?
That's right. Now, this is fascinating stuff, and just sorry for my interjection, but so Einstein said, well, the moon has to have existence in and of itself. Well, does it? Does it? Why? Says who? See, again, okay, I don't want to sound facetious, and I don't want to.
It sounds like crazy talk, Mickey.
I know it does sound like crazy. I get it. But this is really the fundamental issue we're dealing with here, guys, and this is important for everybody to understand. There is nothing that would, going by first principles, there's nothing that would lead you to believe that anything is as it is. Wow, that doesn't make any sense, Meg. Okay, let me.
I'm glad you made that clearer.
We are operating under an uncounted number of assumptions from the day we are born. Uncounted number of assumptions. We just make assumptions. We tend to believe things we're told. Sometimes we find out for ourselves. Sometimes we don't. Or the stove, if a hot stove is going to burn your hand. Well, you can believe it or not. If you don't believe it, you burn it. You realize, oh, that's true. Thank you very much. But the problem here is that we take a lot of things for as given. So we say here that the universe either came into being in a Big Bang, or it always existed, or some other, or maybe it's just the dream of some godhead, or whatever it might be, right? But there seems to be this assumption that there was always something there before we got here. So before we got here, there was a whole bunch of stuff here. That's what the going assumption is. That sounds like a pretty reasonable assumption, right? Except why? Why is it that way? Why is it a reasonable assumption? If you look at the nature of reality, especially as it is revealed within the quantum mechanics, then this assumption no longer makes any sense. Because, well, if we were in here to observe it, the universe and whatever, and again, if you guys bear with our hypothesis, then we are in fact here to make this reality what it is and ensure its continued existence, then there was nothing there before consciousness got here. There was nothing here before consciousness got here. Okay, let that sink in. That's one of the fundamental lessons we seem to be taking away from the latest breakthroughs in science. Unless there's consciousness, there is no reality. Now, this sounds completely contradictory to everything that you probably believe and have been taught in school. The universe is a big machine with cogs and wheels, and it moves around. It's got certain laws and gravity and dark forces and so forth, and it's all good, right? But essentially completely independent and autonomous from consciousness. Like, it's got nothing to do with us. The universe would still spin around, and the solar system would still be there, and the galaxies and all these wonderful things. They would still be there if there was no consciousness. Now, that's what people believe. But is that really the case? Is the universe simply a huge mechanical clock, let's call it, right? I mean, obviously, it doesn't have gears and levers and such, but it is just a gigantic machine that is governed by certain rules and laws, and there's motion, and the motion is following the same rules everywhere we think. But it doesn't seem to be the case, guys. So let's throw that assumption out the window. Okay, so the moon is going to be there whether you look at it or not. I don't think that's a valid assumption anymore. I don't think you can say that. I do not think you can say that. Okay, in Schrödinger's cat, how is the moon different from Schrödinger's cat? How is the moon different from an electron. Oh, the moon is a lot bigger, Mickey. Yeah, I know. It's a lot bigger. Yeah, you better science away all day. No, but the fundamental problem here is that the moon is made up of the same subatomic particles and smaller things yet as everything else. And those tiny little particles, they need to be looked at to live in a certain reality. The double slit experiments has shown us that if you observe something or not, let's call it measure, in order to satisfy the physicists, if you measure something and if you don't measure something, the two states will give you a very different outcome of your experiment. Fundamentally different. Okay, observed versus unobserved, measured versus unmeasured. Two very different things. So therefore, if you translate this to the macro world, because at some point you enter the macro world, and again, it's completely arbitrary that we operate at this level. Maybe there are beings out there to whom galaxies are just tiny clusters of fog. Who knows, right? I mean, massively large beings, much larger than us. In fact, maybe our galaxies are their atoms. I don't know. But my point is, on our scale, the human scale, if you will, or the observable human galactic cosmic scale, we choose to believe, those quantum mechanical observations no longer apply. They're no longer relevant. Doesn't matter. I say to you, no, wrong. Why would it? If I built a snowman out of Lego pieces, and plastic has a melting point of 100 degrees Celsius. I'm just making this up. I don't know what the melting point is. And then I got a Lego block. So the plastic is over here. The plastic molecules, they will melt at 100. They will decohere, if you will. They will lose their bonds at 100 degrees, the plastic molecules. But I've shaped them into Lego blocks, and the Lego blocks is now built into a huge snowman. Now that's saying, the 100-degree dissolution of molecular bonds of the plastic has nothing to do with the snowman, because the snowman is so much larger. It's so much bigger. I'll tell you what, if it hits 100 degrees, that snowman is going to melt. Are you with me, guys? You understand what I'm saying here? Mm-hmm. The plastic that is fundamentally making up the Lego blocks, which are fundamentally making up the snowman, are still governed by the same laws and still governed by the same observable phenomena as the plastic. They're all the same. The plastic snowman, same thing. Plastic molecules, snowman. No difference. Doesn't matter how big you make it. Yeah? You with me so far? Good. This is really the problem. We can no longer make these assumptions, guys. I know it becomes very esoteric, very philosophical. I get it. It's very metaphysical. We're going into the realm of, you can't really prove any of that. No, you can't, because we have all been conditioned, and maybe there are more species than just us that have been conditioned to believe in this reality. Maybe there are a billion species out there. Let's not be so small-minded here. Maybe the entire universe is filled with I don't know, petabillions or quintillions or whatever, a googolplex worth of sentient species, and they're all imprisoned here for the only reason of bringing this reality into existence. That's the only reason we're all here. Okay, let's be so small-minded as to only think about the human and the earth and all that stuff. There might be other sentient species in the same boat as us. Some might realize this, some might not. Who knows? Okay, but fundamentally, we must look at reality differently, because we know it no longer conforms to what we think it should be, or what we've been taught it is. Which brings us back to the article. Now, these ideas are speculative, clearly, right? And it may turn out that quantum physics has no fundamental role either for or in the workings of the mind. But if nothing else, these possibilities just show how strangely quantum theory forces us to think. The most famous intrusion of the mind into quantum mechanics comes in the double slit experiment. Imagine shrinking a beam of light at a screen shining. Imagine shining a beam of light at a screen that contains two closely spaced parallel slits. Some of the light passes through the slits, whereupon it strikes another screen. We've all talked about this experiment quite a bit, guys, and it's Dave's most favorite experiment in the world. Now, light can be thought of as a kind of wave. And when waves emerge from two slits like this, they can interfere with each other. That makes sense. Like on the beach, you can see if you throw two rocks into the ocean, the concentric circles these rocks form, they will interfere with each other. That's what that really is. That's what it means. If their peaks coincide, they reinforce each other. So they get stronger. Whereas if a peak and a trough coincide, they cancel each other out. That's simple frequency modeling. You've seen this too. This wave interference is called diffraction. And it produces a series of alternating bright and dark stripes on the back screen, where the light waves are either reinforced or cancelled out. That makes sense, right? Like a black and white striped pattern. The implication seems to be that each particle passes simultaneously through both slits. This experiment was understood to be a characteristic. This experiment was understood to be a characteristic of wave behavior over 200 years ago, well before quantum theory existed. The double slit experiment can also be performed with quantum particles like electrons. So not just photons, but electrons. Tiny charged particles that are components of atoms, so therefore part of matter. That's what I'm saying. A moon is matter, an electron is matter. In a counterintuitive twist, these particles can behave like waves. That means they can undergo diffraction when a stream of them passes through the two slits, producing an interference pattern. And in fact, now suppose that the quantum particles are sent through the slits one by one. This is really the crux. This is the crux. Because if you've got many particles coming through, you can argue for the interference pattern. Yeah, you shoot particles. Okay, so if it's a wave, that's okay. It produces an interference pattern. But even many particles, if you shoot them through, they will produce some kind of interference pattern because they bounce off each other, and you probably get some kind of interference pattern. So by shooting a lot of them through, you don't really get into hot water yet. However, okay. Now, if you send these quantum particles through the slit one by one, and their arrival at the screen is likewise seen one by one. Now, there's apparently nothing for each particle to interfere with it along its route, because it's by itself. It's just going by itself. Yet, nevertheless, the pattern of particle impacts that builds up over time reveals interference bands. Aha! The implication seems to be that each particle passes simultaneously through both slits and interferes with itself. This combination of both paths at once is known as a superposition state. I've position a lot. Superposition is simply every state that can exist, existing. That's superposition. It will not collapse into the relativistic now until it's observed. Now, but this is really where the really odd thing comes in. The really, really odd thing. If we place a detector, a measurement device, right, inside or just behind one slit, for example, we can find out whether any given particle goes through it or not. So we now know, if the particle is actually in fact going through that slit. In that case, however, the interference vanishes simply by observing a particle's path. Right? Particle's path. Even if that observation should not disturb the particle's motion, we change the outcome. Okay, we change the outcome. That's crazy talk, right, Dave?
Mm-hmm.
The physicist Pascual Jordan, who worked with who did he work with? Quantum guru Niels Bohr in Copenhagen in the 1920s, put it like this. This is what Pascual Jordan said. Observations not only disturb what has to be measured, they produce it. We compel, in brackets the quantum particle, to assume a definitive position. Okay? In other words, Jordan said, we ourselves produce the results of measurements. If that is so, okay, let me just quickly repeat what he said. And I want you to all take that on board. Okay? It's really important. He said, we create reality by observing what happens. And that's one of the crux points of the hypothesis. And now this comes from some of the smartest minds that have ever graced our planet. However, Dave.
Yes. However, it gets even stranger. If nature seems to be changing its behavior depending on whether we look or not, we could try to trick it into showing its hand. To do so, we could measure which path the particle took through the double slits, but only after it has passed through. And that's it. Once it's passed through, can we measure it? Now think about that. By then, it ought to have decided whether to take one path or both. The sheer fact of noticing, rather than physical disturbance caused by measuring, can cause the collapse. An experiment for doing this was proposed in the 70s by the American physicist John Wheeler. Choice experiment was performed in the following decade, in the 80s. It uses clever techniques to make measurements on the paths of quantum particles, generally particles of light called photons, after they should have chosen whether to take one path or a superposition of two paths. Because only in two paths could they interfere with themselves. Make sense? All right. It turns out that just as Bohr confidently predicted, it makes no difference whether to delay the measurement or not, whether you do delay it or not. As long as we measure the photon's path before its arrival at the detector is finally registered, we lose all interference. So what they're saying is, we don't care whether it's gone through the slot or not, but let's start measuring it after it's gone through the slot, and it still collapses the waveform. Okay. Whether in these experiments we discover the path of the quantum particle, its cloud of possible routes collapses into a single well-defined state. What's more, the delayed choice experiment implies that the sheer act of noticing, rather than any physical disturbance caused by measuring, can cause a collapse. But does this mean that true collapse has only happened when the result of a measurement impinges on our consciousness? It's hard to avoid the implication that consciousness and quantum mechanics are somehow linked. We don't want to believe that we can think about something to change the outcome. It's hard to avoid it, honestly. The implication that consciousness and quantum mechanics are somehow linked. The possibility was admitted in the 1930s by the Hungarian physicist Eugene Wigner. And he's quoted as saying, "It follows that the quantum description of objects is influenced by impressions entering my consciousness," he wrote. Solipsism may be logically consistent with the present quantum mechanics, end quote. Wheeler even entertained the thought that the presence of the living beings which are capable of noticing has transformed what was previously a multitude of possible quantum pasts into one concrete history. Because that's, you're talking about going back in time to change the outcome. In this sense, Wheeler said, we become participants in the evolution of the universe since its very beginning, is his words. We live in a participatory universe.
This is not a spectator sport.
To this day, physicists do not agree on the best way to interpret these quantum experiments, and to some extent, what you make of them is, at the moment, up to you. But one way or another, it's hard to avoid the implication that consciousness and quantum mechanics are somehow linked.
Heady stuff, my friend. Heady stuff. Now, WD in Irish said something beautiful, WD in Irish. And this is what this is from the chat room, by the way. I wouldn't have seen it if I hadn't believed it.
Oh, very nice.
The last, yeah, right. I thought you might like it. A nice little twist on. I wouldn't have believed if I hadn't seen it. Whereas in reality, it really is like you said, W in Irish. If you hadn't seen it, you wouldn't have believed it, right? So you have to believe it before you can see it. Really, that's what we're saying here, and that's not what we're saying. That's what everybody seems to be saying that looks at this in any serious way, form, or fashion, and it is disconcerting. All of a sudden, prayer, the power of prayer, and WD in Irish, thank you very much again. The intent, correct, intent, are very important. So we know that prayer actually works. Directed prayer, death prayer, all kinds of prayers, they all work, right? It's a thing. It's a thing. A meditation, focusing your mind, things like that. These are all very, very important. Well, you know what people believe? Diet joke just asked if electrons are psychic. There's a school of thought, a philosophy, if you will, a faith, others call it, that believes everything has consciousness. It's an extended form of animism. everything has a spirit, a living energy, died down to the subatomic level. Why not? Why? Who's to say that consciousness starts or stops at our level?
Mm-hmm.
Why not? Do I think the Earth has got some kind of a living field? Yes. The solar system? Probably. The galaxies? Sure. The universe is a whole thing? Why not? But if you go up into the big, why can't you go into the small? Why can't an electron or a photon have some kind of animistic, spiritual component to it? Why not? Why not? Because they are part of us. You're right. Again, Dublin Irish. Again, this is a really great interaction here from the chat room. You're right. To my point earlier, the tiniest bits make us up. We are made of these tiny bits. So where does the spark of consciousness all of a sudden come from, right? Is it just... And if it's... In fact, if we are living in a hologram, guess what? Even the tiniest fragment of the hologram contains its totality.
The entire hologram. That's right.
Ah, wow. Bang. Don't go away, guys. There's more to come.
Use the time to donate if you can, and we'll see you on the other side of this short station break.
Listen to Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. We'll be right back after this message.
This is Thomas, a.k.a. a Mad Painter. I'd like you to join me Monday nights, 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for Open Canvas. Don't forget to bring an open mind.
Yes, folks, that's right. Bring an open mind to an open canvas. Again, that is Monday nights, 10 p.m. Eastern. UFOs to government corruption. This is Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. You don't need to expect us. We're already here.
There is no denying the world is awakening. We see it in the global uprisings and demonstrations of the people around the planet and the new way of thinking and living that is arising naturally within each one of us and our communities. I have been a major player in this global shift and movement for over 20 years and have helped tens of thousands of people around the world change their lives and find their voice in order to help create the paradigm change we so desperately need. Join me here at Revolution Radio on the Just Bernard Show every Tuesday at noon Eastern Time for 2 hours of powerful interviews and discussion with some of the most influential visionaries of consciousness, alternative media, and suppressed knowledge. We promise to reveal the real matrix and empower your human experience.
Safe? Do you have the necessary information to assist you in confidently living through just about any survival situation? Is survival and gardening, off-grid living, medical knowledge, or even natural or man-made EMPs on your list of personal concerns? Do you have your documents and your personal information in a safe place in your hands where you know where it is? Well, check out our preloaded EMP-proof thumb drive. Over 3 gigs of survival documents and how-tos, plus the USDA offline food preservation website, and much, much more, including a surprise bonus we just can't tell you about here. With plenty of room left over to store your most important documents. Imagine if a megavirus or a computer failure took out your bank, or all the banks for that matter. Are your banking records safe in your hands? So when they get things fixed and repaired, you can say, hey, look, this is what I had. You have it. I want it back. Is your personal data safe? Family records, addresses, phone numbers, well, squeeze on over to freedomslips.com. Yes, that's www.freedomslips.com. Click the banner on the homepage for the EMP-proof bullet drive to get the full scoop of everything that we offer. So, folks, keep your data safe for your peace of mind. Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. You don't need to expect us. We're already here.
Ladies and gentlemen, can I please have your attention? I've just been handed an urgent news story, and I need all of you to stop what you're doing and listen.
On the go? Still want to listen? Don't have one of those fancy phones with too many buttons? Don't know what an app is? Or you don't even care? Well, we got you here at Revolution Radio. Now you can dial in 24/7 to listen to our shows. We have a number for Studio A and Studio B, and best of all, it's free. Don't forget, carrier charges for your cell phone provider may apply though, so check with your cell provider to make sure. So ready? Here you go. Get a pen. Here's the number. Studio A is 712-432-6958, and Studio B is 716-748-0112. Thank you very much for listening to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, the #1 listener-supported radio station in the world. Expressed on this radio station, its programs, and its website by the hosts, guests, and call-in listeners or chatters are solely the opinions of the original source who expressed them. They do not necessarily represent the opinions of Revolution Radio and freedomslips.com, its staff, or affiliates. You're listening to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host.
Hello and welcome back to Dave and Becky's trying to set out. I can hear myself again. Dave, if you're on mute, I think it's only when you're on mute, so try to go on off mute. Anyway, so here we go. Dave and Becky's trying to set out. Show number 267, 760, and 200, and we are talking about the quantum mind. And yes, I'm talking very fast. People told me I'm talking very fast. Is that true? Maybe I am talking very fast because I was discussing the show with a few friends of mine, and they're saying, you have these concepts, you rattle through them, you go, blah, 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 and all of a sudden all we're hearing is blah, 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 exactly that, right? And my friend, in fact, Phil, I don't know if he's listening today or not, he said to me, I listen to you, and then there's a bit of interference, and then I listen to Dave, and then, you say something, and then he says something, and all of a sudden you guys are agreeing, even though the points you made were completely contradictory. Well, that's probably because of the interference, and we probably reached some agreement in between. So if I am talking too fast, I do apologize, and I'll try to speak slower. But
that's very funny.
It's true, though. I think I might be talking too fast.
Well,
because the concepts we're discussing here, well, they're probably familiar to you and I, Dave, right? They're fairly familiar. Not as familiar, potentially, to our esteemed listenership, even especially first-time listeners. By the way, hello, everybody who's a first-time listener. Thank you and welcome aboard, whether or not you're live or on YouTube.
Mackie, I'm not sure that we've contradicted each other. I'd like to listen back to the example if it was ever possible. Phil, if you're listening, please do message us via our website, www.shinysideout.net. Find our contact details there and let us know. Cite an example. I'd love to listen to it back and see it because, this live radio.
And I asked him too, but he couldn't recall it. And I think what happened is, like, I was talking about something, you were talking about something, there was interference, like crackling or static or whatever, and couldn't really hear everything. And all of a sudden, we seem to be talking about two different things, and that can happen because we do switch, and there's the stream of consciousness that this show encourages and promotes, leads us to jump all over the place, but always in the service of the bigger picture. We never randomly, just to confuse you guys, jumping back and forth. Hopefully, it is always to make the points clearer. Hopefully, it is to draw a connecting line between two seemingly disparate topics, which brings us back to the topic at hand. Beginning in the 1980s, the British physicist Roger Penrose, whom we've met many times now on this show, suggested that the link might work in the other direction. Whether or not consciousness can affect quantum mechanics, he said, perhaps quantum mechanics is involved in consciousness. Right? So he's saying, okay, so consciousness clearly has an effect on quantum mechanics, but perhaps quantum mechanics is involved in consciousness. Perhaps quantum mechanics underlies somehow or has some kind of part to play in consciousness. And maybe, and again, this is jumping a little outside of the current topic, but maybe AI, artificial intelligence, the singularity event we're all waiting for, the rise of the machines, will in fact be upon us once we can introduce quantum processes into computing processes. And maybe that is the great divide that we can't bridge at this point. I mean, we're throwing a lot of processing power at these things. We are. It's like petabytes and warehouses full of CPUs. So it's not for lack of trying, but I think we're going completely about it the wrong way. Maybe we do need these quantum processes to be intertwined with our quest for AI. Is AI something we want? I don't know. Maybe not.
I'd be scared to say yes.
Yeah, right. That's the thing, though. You remember the story? I think it's an Arthur C. Clarke story, or Isaac Asimov. No, sorry, that's Isaac Asimov. I love the guy. One of the New Mutants. So there was these people built a supercomputer. I've told the story before. They built a supercomputer, and I'm going to borrow from Douglas Adams and call it the Deep Thought. It wasn't that, but just a homage to that guy as well. Let's call it Deep Thought. And the people built him, and they put a question into the machine, right? So they fed a question in the little punch card system, put the question in the whoosh. And the question was, is there a God? Is there a God? Is there a God? Does God exist? Yeah. All of a sudden, this thunderstorm gathers, massive clouds and of biblical proportions, and this thunder and lightning is unleashed and shorts out the off switch. Shorts out the off switch of the super machine Deep Thought. Shorts it out. Can't be switched off anymore. And at that point, the answer is issued forth from within the machine, and it reads, "Now there is." I love that. I love that story. But let's see what Penrose has to say to us. What if, Penrose asked, there are molecular structures in our brains that are able to alter their state in response to a single quantum event? Could not these structures then adopt a superposition state, just like the particles in the double slit experiment? And might those quantum superpositions then show up in the way neurons are triggered to communicate via electrical signals? Maybe, says Penrose, our ability to sustain seemingly incompatible mental states is no quirk of perception, but a real quantum effect. So, rather than just being computers ourselves and being in a on and off state, or yes or no or whatever, we actually can hold contradicting ideas in our head. Yeah, we can lie. We can produce knowing falsehoods. That's quite a feat of imagination, by the way. A machine can't lie unless you program it to do so. It takes imagination. Maybe this word imagination, Dave, this which has artistic ramifications as well. Imagination, right? Maybe
you can't do that, Dave.
Exactly, right? Maybe that's the crux here. Anyway, perhaps quantum mechanics is in fact involved in consciousness, he says. After all, the human brain seems able to handle cognitive processes that still far exceed the capabilities of digital computers. Of course, we've discussed this just then. Perhaps we can even carry out computational tasks that are impossible on ordinary computers, which use classical digital logic. And we've spoken about this at some length as well. We spoke about it in our show on ontology as well. Maybe it is time to step away from our logic and allow for what, again, Clarke, in fact, called the next evolution in intelligence, intuition. Intuition. Maybe that's the next bit. Penrose first proposed that quantum effects feature in human cognition in his 1989 book, The Emperor's New Mind. The idea is called OR, and we've discussed this as well, which is short for orchestrated objective reduction. Orchestrated objective reduction. The phrase objective reduction means that, as Penrose believes, the collapse of quantum interference and superposition is a real physical process, like the bursting of a bubble. Orr draws on Penrose's suggestion that gravity is responsible for the fact that everyday objects, such as chairs and planets, do not display quantum effects. Interesting. Penrose believes that quantum superpositions become impossible for objects much larger than atoms because their gravitational effects would then force two incompatible versions of space-time to coexist. So he presupposes here that gravitation, or gravity, laws of gravity, prohibits quantum effects from taking place at our macroscopic level. Gravity. Penrose developed this idea further with American physician Stuart Hameroff. In his 1994 book, Shadows of the Mind, he suggested that the structures involved in this quantum cognition might be protein strands called microtubules. We've discussed those. Mm-hmm. These are found in most of our cells, including the neurons in our brains. Penrose and Hameroff argue that vibrations of microtubules can adopt a quantum superposition. But there's no evidence that such a thing is remotely feasible. It has been suggested, though, that the idea of quantum superpositions in microtubules is supported by experiments described in 2013. But, in fact, those studies made no mention of quantum effects at all. Besides, most researchers think that Orr, or the Orr idea, was ruled out by a study published in 2000. Physicist Max Tegmark calculated that quantum superpositions of the molecules involved in neural signal could not survive for even a fraction of the time needed for such a signal to get anywhere.
Other researchers have found evidence for quantum effects in living beings. Quantum effects such as superposition are easily destroyed because of a process called decoherence. This is caused by the interactions of a quantum object with its surrounding environment, through which the quantumness leaks away. Decoherence is expected to be extremely rapid in warm and wet environments like living cells. Nerve signals are electrical pulses caused by the passage of electrically charged atoms across the walls of nerve cells. If one of these atoms was in a superposition and then collided with a neuron, Tegmark showed that the superposition should decay in less than 1/1000th of a second. It takes at least 10,000 trillion times as long for a neuron to discharge a signal. As a result, ideas about quantum effects in the brain are viewed with great skepticism. However, Penrose is unmoved by those arguments and stands by the Orr hypothesis. And despite Tegmark's prediction of ultra-fast decoherence in cells, other researchers have found evidence for quantum effects in living beings. Some argue that quantum mechanics is harnessed by migratory birds that use magnetic navigation, and by green plants when they use sunlight to make sugars in photosynthesis. Besides, the idea that the brain might employ quantum tricks shows no sign of going away. For there is now another quite different argument for it. In a study published in 2015, physicist Matthew Fisher of the University of California of Santa Barbara argued that the brain might contain molecules capable of sustaining more robust quantum superpositions. Specifically, he thinks that the nuclei of phosphorus atoms may have this ability. Phosphorus atoms are everywhere in living cells. They often take the form as phosphate ions, in which the phosphorus atom joins up with 4 oxygen atoms. Such ions are the basic unit of energy within cells. Much of the cell's energy is stored in molecules called ATP, which contain a string of these 3 phosphate groups joined to an organic molecule. When one of the phosphates is cut free, energy is released for the cell to use. Cells have molecular machinery for assembling phosphate ions into groups and cleaving them off again. It's actually a mechanism. Fisher suggests a scheme in which two phosphide ions might be placed in a special kind of superposition called an entangled state. We've spoken about that many, many times. Phosphorus spins could resist decoherence for a day. For a day or so, even in living cells. Mackie.
Whoops, I'm coming off mute. There's by the way, there's a really good discussion in the chat room, guys. So I do urge you to go into the chat room and participate. It's really great. I love it when people talk to the topic or about the topic that we're discussing and adding to the discussion. So thank you very much for that. I really appreciate it. They're talking about the frame rate of the human eye and what is the smallest measurement possible of time, in fact. And Dyke Joke quite correctly said it's the number of Planck seconds in a second. So again, related to the Planck length. And in fact, how would you prove that? That's a very good question. How would you prove it? Well, you can't. It's a theoretical assumption at this point. So we talk about theories, guys, not facts. Most of the things we discuss in our lives are theories. Theory of gravity, theory of evolution, theory of this, theory of that. They're all theories. There are very few people that say, oh, I'm going to talk to you about the fact of this and about the fact of that, because there aren't any. There aren't any facts. They're only fluctuating theories and fledgling hypotheses. As Dave has said, though, the phosphorus nuclei have a quantum property called spin, which makes them rather like little magnets with poles pointing in particular directions. In an entangled state, the spin of one phosphorus nucleus depends on that of the other. Put another way, entangled states are really superposition states involving more than one quantum particle. Yeah, so we're good with that. Fisher says that the quantum mechanical behavior of these nuclear spins could plausibly resist decoherence on human time scales. He agrees with Tegmark that quantum vibrations, like those postulated by Penrose and Hameroff, will be strongly affected by the surroundings and will decohere almost immediately. But nuclear spins do not interact very strongly with their surroundings. That's true. Otherwise, they wouldn't spin. All the same, quantum behavior is in the phosphorus nuclear spins would have to be protected from decoherence. Right? The quantum behavior would have to be protected from decoherence. This might happen, Fisher says, if the phosphorus atoms are incorporated into larger objects called Posner molecules. These are clusters of 6 phosphate ions combined with 9 calcium ions. There's some evidence that they can exist in living cells, though this is currently far from conclusive. Okay, so in Posner molecules, Fisher argues phosphorus spin could resist decoherence for a day or so, even in living cell. This means they could influence how the brain works. Because of entanglement in Posner molecules, 2 such signals might thus in turn become entangled, a kind of quantum superposition of a thought, one could say. If quantum processing with nuclear spins is in fact present in the brain, it would be an extremely common occurrence, happening pretty much all the time, Fisher says. All the time, of course. I mean, if it's a fundamental brain process, then that's exactly what would happen. He first got his idea when he started thinking about mental illness. A capsule of lithium carbonate. Yeah. Sorry, that's the medicine that they used. We'll talk about that in a second. So there's a capsule of lithium. I want you to picture a capsule of lithium carbonate. My entry into the biochemistry of the brain started when I decided 3 or 4 years ago to explore how on earth the lithium ion could have such a dramatic effect in treating mental conditions. That's what Fisher says. At this point, Fisher's proposal is no more than an intriguing idea. Now, lithium drugs, I was just talking about the capsule of lithium carbonate, right? Lithium drugs are widely used for treating bipolar disorder. They work, but nobody knows why. Why do they work? Placebo effect, Dave, placebo effect. I wasn't looking for a quantum explanation, Fisher says, but then he came across a paper reporting that lithium drugs had different effects on the behavior of rats, depending on what form or isotope of lithium was used. So the isotope variance of lithium mattered. On the face of it, that was extremely puzzling. In chemical terms, different isotopes behave almost identical. They have very little differences. So if the lithium worked like a conventional drug, the isotopes should all have had the same effect. But Fisher realized that the nuclei of atoms of different lithium isotopes can have different spins. This quantum property might affect the way lithium drugs act. For example, if lithium substitutes for calcium in Posner molecules, the lithium spins might feel and influence those of phosphorus atoms, and so interfere with their entanglement. I love it that these people are looking at this and are really getting down to the nitty-gritty, Dave.
Absolutely. And I was muted for a while there. I had a couple of little chuckles to myself. You know, we don't even know what consciousness is. I want you to think about that phrase. We really don't. We have no clue. Look, if it's true, it would help to explain why lithium can treat bipolar disorder. At this point, Fisher's proposal is no more than an intriguing idea. But there are several ways in which its plausibility can be tested, starting with the idea that phosphorus spins in Posner molecules can keep their quantum coherence for long periods. It's a good start. That is what Fisher aims to do next. All the same, he is wary of being associated with the earlier ideas about quantum consciousness, which he sees as highly speculative at best. Physicists are not terribly comfortable with finding themselves inside their theories. Most hope that consciousness and the brain can be kept out of quantum theory, and perhaps vice versa. After all, we do not even know what consciousness is, let alone have a theory to describe it. We all know what red is like. As Meki's example, was it 2 shows ago, Meki? I think it was. But we have no way to communicate the sensation of red. It does not help that there is now a new age cottage industry devoted to notions of quantum consciousness, claiming that quantum mechanics offers plausible rationales for such things as telepathy and telekinesis. As a result, physicists are often embarrassed to even mention the words quantum and consciousness in the same sentence. But setting that aside, the idea has a long history ever since the observer effect and the mind first insinuated themselves into quantum theory in the earliest of the days of the experiment. It has been devilishly hard to kick them out. A few researchers think we might never manage to do that. In 2016, Adrian Kent of the University of Cambridge in the UK, one of the most respected quantum philosophers, speculated that consciousness might alter the behavior of quantum systems in subtle but detectable ways. Kent is very cautious about this idea. There is no compelling reason, he says, of principle to believe that quantum theory is the right theory in which to try to formulate a theory of consciousness, or that the problem of quantum theory might have anything to do with the problem of consciousness. End quote, he admits. Every line of thought of the relationship of consciousness to physics runs into deep trouble. But he says that it is hard to see how a description of consciousness based purely on pre-quantum physics can account for all the features it seems to have. One particularly puzzling question is how our conscious minds can experience unique sensations, such as the color red or the smell of frying bacon. Oh, bacon. I had bacon this morning. I know exactly what it smells like. With the exception of people with visual impairments, of course. We all know that what red is like, but we have no way to communicate to them the sensation, and there's nothing in physics that tell us what it should be like.
And in fact, we discussed this when we discussed ontology, and I'm going to talk about that in a second. The state of qualitative or experiential phenomena. Why do we experience phenomena, right? And this is really what it comes down to again, the communication between minds. And I will state again for the record that I believe at one point we had in fact telepathic abilities. We still might have to some extent, but we did not vocalize languages. We did not vocalize. We simply communicated in concepts. And I do believe, and this might sound heretical to some, I do believe that autism, or children or people that suffer from autism, are in fact telepathic, are in fact trying to tell us what they feel, what they see, concepts, but they are frustrated because we can't receive what it is they're trying to tell us. They're getting frustrated because we are in fact in their world mute and dumb. Okay, we are the ones that can't communicate. They're communicating on all pistons, whereas we are just a black hole to which they can't communicate. That's my theory at this point. That's my theory. I don't know if that's true or not, but I will spend some more time on this. Now, what Dave was talked about are sensations that are called qualia. So that, how I spell a Frank Bacon, they're phenomena. We perceive them as unified properties of the outside world, but in fact, they are products of our consciousness, and that is very hard to explain. Indeed, in 1995, philosopher David Chalmers dubbed it the hard problem of consciousness. And again, we spoke about that. We've already introduced you guys to that way of thinking. The hard problem of consciousness are these experiential phenomena. Why do we have them? Every line of thought, Kant says, on the relationship of consciousness to physics runs into deep trouble. Deep trouble. This has prompted him to suggest that we could make some progress on understanding the problem of the evolution of consciousness if we suppose that consciousness alters, albeit perhaps very slightly and subtly, quantum probabilities. Ooh, now we are really playing with fire. We are really playing with fire here, because what he's saying is what I'm saying, that consciousness in fact does alter reality. Quantum consciousness is widely derided as mystical woo-woo, right? Okay, but it will not go away. In other words, the mind could genuinely affect the outcomes of measurements. The mind could genuinely affect the outcomes of measurements. Let me say this one more time. The mind could genuinely affect the outcomes of measurements. It does not, in this view, exactly determine what is real, but it might affect the chance that each of the possible actualities permitted by quantum mechanics is the one we do in fact observe, in a way that quantum theory itself cannot predict. Kant says that we might look for such effects experimentally. He even bravely estimates the chances of finding them. I would give credence of perhaps 15% that something specifically to do with consciousness causes deviations from quantum theory, with perhaps 3% credence that this will be experimentally detectable within the next 50 years, he says. And I say 23% of people know that's complete bunkum. I'm sorry. But as soon as you start assigning positive numbers to something which you have no idea about, I sort of tune out. Okay? Now, if that happens, though, it would completely change the way we look at the world. Completely. Not just physics and the mind, the world. Because it would be in complete agreement and alignment with the hypothesis, which states now, for the last month or so, that consciousness is in fact why we are here. Consciousness that is required to collapse this reality into the reality that we're currently enjoying, or not, as the case may be. To what end, though, I don't know. I don't know what the end of it is. I know now why we're here, to make this all happen, pretty much, but I do not know why that is a desirable state for someone somewhere. So that's that article. Dave, what do you reckon? That was a brainful, wasn't it?
I have to examine the positions that everybody's taking. There are some curious minds in the physics realm who are attempting at all costs to get in and find out what's really going on. But for the most
Absolutely.
part, what I see are people maybe a little scared of what they might find. They're a little scared of their reputation being connected to something that's a little too esoteric in the physics world because they can't measure it.
Yeah.
You can see that, Meki, right?
Oh, I completely agree. Yeah, I completely agree.
So, what's the outcome? Well, one of the experiments that has launched since the 80s, and it's only recent too. I forget when it was, 2007 maybe, I think. Meki, wasn't it the one where they decided what they were going to do in a double slit?
Yes.
Was to extend one of the arms of the photon. So what they're going to do is put a photon through a prism and send it downrange laterally away from the experiment. Let's just say at least twice the distance that its colliding cousin is going to collide with the back wall, having chosen a path through either A or B slit, or both, or none. And if it made it through, collides with the back wall. Having decided at that point, when it hits the back wall, whether it's going to be an interference or it's going to hit as a single photon and illuminate the screen. We all know the double slit experiment. But because it's a partnership of these alike photons, one hits the board and then one goes downrange and still traveling. It hasn't done anything yet. Yeah? And they decide what they're going to do is measure the state of that after it's hit the board to see which one it went down. The moment they turn that mechanism on to record which one it went down, it collapses back to a photon, even though it was in a interference pattern. Now that's in arrears. How can that be? That's the most extraordinary measurement of the double slit that I've seen to date. Because remember, if you can explain it, there's a Nobel Prize award for you. In doing so, your name goes down in history forever as the person who discovered why it happens. And this is because no one knows. It's like I keep telling people this, Meki. It's just like you're in a video game and you're sort of at the right angle to look where two walls join, and there's a little bit of a gap in the wall, and you can get right up to it and see behind the map, behind all the vertices, behind all the walls, behind all the renderings, and see what's really behind the map. And you'll see there's nothing there. It's completely empty. It's on a video game. But imagine if that was possible in real life. Imagine if some way something caught your eye in the corner of the room and you examined it to find that it was a hole into behind our reality, and you saw that this was actually a hologram, or it wasn't real. We're in a virtual world. Yeah, we can, like in the Matrix, we can feel and touch the tables. We can sit in a chair. We can feel it's comfortable. We can eat food and taste. Why does it do all this? Our brain's just a piece of flesh. It's not doing anything. Is it really, or is it not? Is it partnered with something else? Is this actually virtual reality that we are completely unaware of? And the irony of us playing virtual games in a virtual reality is tremendously funny. But
it is.
But if this is like The Sims and we're all people just doing our business, and we're trying to work out what the program has done, like we're broken our programming, we're no longer happy with being confined within the box, we've discovered there is a box. Is that what's going on? And that's why people are really afraid to discover, really, because it all made sense. Einstein's universe, I put my hand up, I was a disciple of Einstein's work. I really like that universe. It was cozy. It was warm. It was an extension of Newton's. Yeah, there was a bit of freakish stuff to do with time and space, how they're connected. They're all the same thing. But it made sense. whether or not you looked at the moon in Einstein's relativity, it still existed. But in this world, the question's raised. If you look at the moon, it's there, but if you don't look, is it still there? And I made the example before, Mekki, to save resources in a computer game, you only have to render what the person's looking at.
That's correct.
You don't have to render what they're not looking at. And you know whether they're looking or not because your program's connected to them. They can't trick you into looking, on the sly at something. It's only the mistakes they can see.
The only time it possibly could catch up with you is when you got a slow machine, for argument's sake, and you look at something that hasn't rendered yet.
Yeah.
It's in the process of rendering. So that's the only time, like a glitch in the Matrix.
Glitch. That's right.
Like that. And I don't know if any of you have experienced things like that, but maybe deja vu is something like that, right? Where you're looking at something, but then it wasn't ready, and then it was quickly made ready, but you already looked at it, and so the deja vu feeling is simply that it wasn't ready yet. But again, to me, be it that or some kind of fractal or some kind of a break or a rift in the space-time continuum, whatever deja vu is, it leads or points, for me at least, to a broken universe, to a broken reality. And this is really the kicker here as well, right, guys? So, because you have to understand that what we've discussed with you, and there's one more article which I think is a little bit too long to be completed today, so we probably leave that for next week, which was written in 2016 November. So the stuff we're bringing to you guys is pretty recent stuff, but let's just explore a little here what we have discussed here. And what we have discussed with you guys are some of the best minds in the world coming at this from different angles, right? From metaphysics, philosophy, quantum mechanics, classical physics, and biology, in fact, psychiatry, psychology, all these people working together, which is what I love to see. That's the only way we can ever make any progress. We have to all work together. We all have to work together because we can't know everything. We can't know everything. It's not possible. Nobody can do that. It's just not possible. So the question then is, if there is a grain of truth in these things, if there's a grain of truth in these things, reality, as we know it, is not at all what we know. And I want you to think about this, Dave. I want you to really think about this. Now, let's say, for argument's sake, this is a holographic universe. Well, whatever that means, because right now it's tough to get your mind around it. It's tough to get your mind around it. The question then becomes, okay, well, it's holographic. So where is it projected from, and against what? That's really the fundamental thing. And you could argue it is projected against, arises from, so whichever term applies here, the quantum form. That's right down to the Planck length reality. Quantum form, where everything else comes from. The 0 point field, if you will. Whatever. What do you want to? I don't care what you want. The ether. Call it the ether. However, and I firmly believe that the pineal gland, which sits at the center of your brain, and in fact of most mammalian brain, is where we are linked, connected to the real universe, the actual universe. That's why there is no magical gate you can go through to escape this. There's actually no portal in this reality that will allow you to physically, as you are in your body, go through and escape this reality. In my opinion, that's my theory, my hypothesis. Don't have to agree with it, but I don't believe that you in your present form can actually escape out of this world, because your body is part of the prison. It's actually really funny. You're in a limited body, in a limited reality, and this is all designed to limit you even further. Everything about us is limiting. The way we're designed physically, 2 eyes forward, right, up and down. We can't fly. So we are earthbound, if you will, and we are gravity bound. So we are pretty much flatlanders, like I said to Dave last time. We're flatlanders by nature. I mean, technology helps us to overcome the flatlandishness of us, right? But fundamentally, we are flatlanders. So it is the pineal gland that links you, I think, to the reality that we have somehow been excluded from. And is it possible then to use the pineal gland to escape this? The answer is probably yes. The answer probably is, but it could also be the point of projection. The pineal gland could be the point of projection. Now, our combined pineal glands might be the point of projections. And the other sentient species, should they have pineal glands or similar organs in their body, could be the points of projection. It is really fascinating when you think about it. And I don't know why people have such a hard time putting or ascribing quantum phenomena to the brain. Like I said earlier, people say, "Oh, the time scales are too large, in our macro world, and it just starts to decohere and of its own accord." No, it does not decohere of its own accord. We know that now. We know it doesn't. We know it. We know reality does not decohere on its own. Let me say this one more time. We know for a fact that reality does not decohere on its own. It likes to exist in a state of superposition. When you fire that photon or electron through that screen and you're not looking at it, that's what you get. We are the limiting factor. We are the filter that bursts the bubble, collapses the waveform, whatever you want to call it, into the one now. It's us. Us. Guys. No one else, it's us. We are doing that. And I know I'm making very definitive statements here. Nobody likes it, but guess what? At some point, you have to make these definitive statements to move forward, right? Even if it's an assumption at this point. But you know what? It's not an assumption because we've tested it experimentally. And using the scientific method, which is so the much vaunted and ballyhooed scientific method, yeah, which can be used for this quite well, if you want certainty in a classical sense. Of course, certainty goes out the window once we analyze the things we've tested, Dave. Once we've analyzed the things and actually looked at them and go, "Oh, well, that's what that means. Oh, well, there goes causality. Bye-bye." The Copenhagen interpretation, right? The many worlds theory and all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
There goes causality. No more cause and effect. No. See you later. There is no cause and effect. There can't be cause and effect. There cannot be. Because, again, experimentally we have shown that we can influence the experiment before it happens. What? So
and
influence the outcome.
And in arrears.
Yes.
The experiment
Correct.
happened,
Right.
Then we observe it, and it changes the outcome. How is that possible?
Retrospectively. Yeah, exactly. It's not even allowed in law. If you have a retrospective law, we go, no, we don't want that. We don't want retrospective laws. But, reality is retrospective. Oh, fair enough then. It's where we are living, guys. This is our neighborhood here, right? Oh, quantum physics. There goes the neighborhood.
It's like having a rewind button.
It is. But you also, with the rewind, comes write your own adventure. Those little books you had to
I remember those.
play your own adventure?
Yes.
And you read, you turn that page. Oh, I don't like that. I'm going to turn another page. Right? So that's what this is. It's rewrite. Rewrite. But that's fundamentally what this means. Now, do we have active control over this? No, we do not. Not on a micro level. So, but because it is possible as a concept, not just as it's not just a thought, but it's actually it's an actuality in this reality. It's an actuality, which means that it is a possibility to do that, to rewind and do over.
It's Control Z.
It is Control Z.
Yeah.
It is Control Z. That's exactly. Now think about that for a second. I'm not saying that we can do it today, or I'm not saying we can't, but I'm saying you and I, we probably can't do it, But the point is that it no longer seems to be breaking any fundamental laws, because it has been proven experimentally that this is, it's a feature of our reality. It's a reset button. It's a do-over. Yeah, you can. Oh, I didn't like that. Zip. Yeah, and look, there are other things as well that would, intimate these kinds of things, like again, deja vu, other breaks in time, like people having out of body experiences, time travel experiences as well, right? All of these things, people even being falling into other times. There's no obviously hard proof for this. There's only stories and anecdotal evidence that we see. There's some physical evidence, if you will, but that could be physical evidence of an advanced civilization, not necessarily time travel. Having said that, Dave, what do we want?
Time travel.
Time travel. When do we want it?
It's irrelevant.
Exactly.
Because once it exists, it always exists.
Alien girl on the the chat today is just on fire, guys. I have to say here. Alien Girl, we travel every night. Yes, Alien Girl, you're 100% correct. That's also one of the cornerstones of the hypothesis. You guys really should listen to show number 100 and number 200.
Mm-hmm.
I believe the only time we can escape this prison that we're in is when we're dreaming.
And Alien Girl's right. Dreamland is another dimension. It's maybe home.
Exactly. That's what we contend. Dreamland is in fact home. Because as you're dreaming, everything makes sense. I'll make this point very quickly. As we're dreaming, everything makes sense. You wake up, the dream becomes completely nonsensical. But while you're dreaming, it makes sense. In my mind, that means I have higher faculties when I'm dreaming than when I'm awake. Higher faculties, I can understand more, right? I understand more. So it's our equivalent of a walk in the prison yard. Because we've also shown you guys that if you do not sleep, and more importantly, you do not dream, you will die.
Mm-hmm.
It's not the sleep deprivation that's going to kill you. It is the dream deprivation that's going to kill you. There's studies that have been done. Dream deprivation will lead to your death. Okay, this is really very, very important to understand these things. And again, I believe it is the pineal gland that allows the prison yard walk, if you will, our connection to the real world. I believe that is in some way responsible for a rapid deterioration. Our prison falls apart as our pineal gland calcifies. Right? I mean, there are many linked systems here, and I do believe that our lifespan was limited because we were getting too close. Because the longer we lived, the more we understood. I believe, and the closer we came to uncovering it. And I believe all the clues that we have, the architectural clues with pineal glands or the lotus flower, the two flanking elephants or pelicans or whatever you want to put there to highlight the importance of the pineal gland, symbolizing the two hemispheres of the brain. All of this stuff was gleaned at some distant past. This is some distant past. They figured all of that stuff out, or were told, or whatever, and they're trying to give us that information. Some mystery schools have some of that knowledge still, and they're teaching it, to each acolyte as they come along, to each new adept of that particular, secret society or brotherhood or sisterhood or whatever it might be. It doesn't really matter. And other clues are, as I said, are in architecture or in stories, in fables, in rituals, in fairy tales. It's all there. But I do believe that in the olden days, Dave, we lived a lot longer, and a lot longer, in fact, and we had more time to figure all the stuff out. Now our lifespans are like mayflies. We're like mayflies now. We boom, gone, right? 80 years, 100, even 120, 130 years. Not really that long. And the only reason
I've got a good example for the lifespan comparison. If anyone is listening who has had a dog.
Mm-hmm.
They age 7 times faster than us if we were to grow to the same age. Makes sense? That's why a dog year is 7 years. So, You think about it from the dog's perspective. They lived and died a lifetime, and we keep going.
Mm-hmm. So I need to answer this. Zippy8609 is completely in disagreement with what we're saying, which is fine. Everybody dreams, Zippy. Everybody. Not all of us remember it. And I'm not understanding the question around how you eat or drink while you're sleeping. Clearly, you don't eat or drink while you're sleeping. Eating or drinking is a requirement of this prison that we're in. Once you're in the higher state, you no longer have need for these gross material things.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not sure what you're saying, but hey, thank you very much for your input. It's great to get some other ideas as well. Oh, he's gone. Right. Maybe it was just trolling a bit. It's all good. Oh, that's funny. But it's good to get some snipings happening once in a while. But you're right, Dave. Right. So
from the dog's perspective, we've barely aged, but they go through childhood, teen years, maturity, and old age in their lifetime, and we've barely even aged a squat. Right. And then they die. You've got to think about that. Now, if we had, to them, we must seem like immortals.
That's right. Exactly. Well, that's the point. And
That is my point. Yes.
Yeah, and the elite, of course, to us, does seem like immortals because they lived for such a long time, and maybe they do live forever. Because you have to understand that we have a built-in kill switch. If you don't get run over by a car, or drown, or fall off a building, or get Ebola, then you will die of old age. And then what does that mean? It means that the cell copying process that your cells, the cell copying itself, mitosis and all that, will become more and more imperfect. But why? Why is that? Because your telomeres. The telomeres are the little bits of DNA that hang at the end of your DNA to protect it from copying errors, if you will. It's like a margin protection. Now these are getting shorter with each copying. They're getting shorter. You go, okay, that's fair enough. It's used up. Well, you go, yeah, fair enough. But no, it's not fair enough because there's something called telomerase. It's an enzyme, telomerase. And now, in fact, there are a lot of books being written around this, and I do urge you to have a look at that. They're coming thick and fast on Amazon now. Telomerase protects telomeres from
it grows them. It grows them back.
Correct. That is exactly correct. So you will never age. If your telomeres stay intact, you will not age. I mean, if you abuse your body and smoke and drink, take drugs and whatever, I mean, you will damage your body. Yes, there's not much necessarily that telomerase can do to prevent any of that. The copying mistakes and cancer from that's just what happens, right? Yeah. But if you live sensibly, live a healthy life, organic food, clean water, blah, 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 all that stuff, there's no reason at all, unless, you die from an accident, why you shouldn't live a very long time indeed. But for some reason, telomerase is switched off. Telomerase is switched off. Interestingly as well, cancer switches it back on.
For itself.
For itself, yeah. So once you get cancer, the cancer cells switch the telomerase production back on to protect itself. The cancer is protecting itself. So, well, you could argue that the cancer, once it grows in your body, is an immortal organism. So the cancer then, starts feeding itself to your demise. So let's be very clear that none of the things we've been saying here are disconnected. They all build on each other. And all of this builds on the next thing. So this is really the beauty of the hypothesis. And people will say, "Oh, Mackie, you're taking too much into consideration." Of course, if you do that, then everything will fit. Well, it shouldn't. It shouldn't fit just because we take everything into consideration. Not at all, Dave. There shouldn't be an underlying truth here. These things shouldn't all fit nicely into each other. They shouldn't, right?
Nothing should connect. Everything should